Dora's life took a tragic turn the day her stepmother cruelly plunged her fingers into Dora's eyes, leaving her blind. Yet, even after losing her sight, Dora's beautiful voice captured the heart of a river god. Dora's mother passed away when she was 12, leaving her in the care of her father. Only a year later, her father also died, leaving Dora with a stepmother and a stepsister who was just 2 months older than her. From that point on, Dora's life became one of hardship and suffering at the hands of her stepmother and stepsister. She was forced to do all the household chores alone, without any help. One of Dora's only joys was her visits to the river to fetch water. At the river, she would compose and sing songs about her sorrowful situation. Her songs, though often filled with pain, brought her some comfort. The river became her secret place, where she could express her emotions freely, away from the harsh punishments that awaited her at home if she was caught singing. One day, after being severely beaten for failing to clean her stepmother's room because she was busy with other chores, Dora sneaked out to the river to soothe her soul with a song. At the river, she met a handsome hunter who was enchanted by her singing. He lit a fire and roasted his catch, sharing it with her. But when Dora realized she had left food cooking on the stove at home, it was too late. She rushed back, only to find the food burned and her stepmother waiting with fury. Her stepmother's punishment was brutal. She dipped her fingers into Dora's eyes, blinding her forever. Now blind, Dora was no longer allowed to do any chores and was often left without food. She spent her days sitting beside the house, crying in despair. But a young boy from the neighborhood, moved by her plight, began sneaking food to her each day. One day, desperate for some solace, Dora begged the boy to take her to the river. Once there, she asked him to leave her alone for a while. As she sat by the river, pouring out her heart in song, something extraordinary happened. A mighty presence emerged from the river, and suddenly, Dora could see again. She saw a shining figure of fair-skinned man with long hair, dressed in a golden robe. He danced in the water to her song, his skin glowing as brightly as his robe. Overwhelmed, Dora tried to retreat quietly, but when she accidentally made a noise, the figure turned toward her, and her sight was lost once more. Frightened, Dora called for help, but there was no one around. She used a stick to navigate her way back home, her tears mingling with the fear of her uncertain future. Back at home, Dora's suffering continued. Her stepmother and stepsister tormented her, with no one around to defend her except for an elderly neighbor, Mama Nana. One day, after a particularly brutal beating, Mama Nana intervened and took Dora into her care, bathing her and feeding her. She threatened Dora's stepmother with police action if the abuse continued. The next day, Dora sat outside her house, lost in thought, when she felt someone's presence. It was the mysterious stranger again, introducing himself as Neon. Dora, frightened but curious, engaged him in conversation, but before she could get any answers, her stepsister interrupted, mocking and tormenting her once more. As days passed, strange things began happening. The village river, which had always been a reliable source of water, dried up in front of Dora's step-siblings' eyes. Though others in the village could still see and fetch water from it, the villagers were puzzled, and Dora's stepmother became frantic, believing they had somehow angered the gods. The village chief summoned Dora's stepmother and her children to the palace. Upon their return, they were silent, refusing to speak to Dora. It was the neighbor's son who eventually told her that the village priest had warned her stepmother to stay away from the river as they had offended the water god. This revelation only made life harder for Dora, as her stepmother and step-siblings began fetching water from a neighboring village and neglected Dora even further. One day, when Dora was desperately thirsty and unable to find anyone to give her water, she wandered through the village in tears, calling out for help. Eventually, a kind stranger, Neon, found her and offered to take her to a place where she could regain her sight. Dora, hopeful and desperate, followed him to the river. There, in the serene surroundings, Neon splashed water on her face, and once again, Dora could see. Overjoyed, Dora turned to thank Neon, but he had vanished without a trace. She returned home, where her stepmother and step-siblings were shocked to see her walking confidently without her stick. When her stepmother questioned her, Dora explained that a stranger had taken her to the river, where she had regained her sight. Her stepmother, realizing the gravity of what had happened, ordered Dora to fetch water from the river, now that she could see again. But as Dora sang her sorrowful song by the river, she couldn't help but wonder about the mysterious figure who had restored her sight and then disappeared.